Hello and welcome to the Power of You.
That's right.
That's who we're celebrating.
Yeah, I know. Celebrating a good, active day. Busy is not the word. Active day. It's a good, active day. And then we took a breath and Power of You. So yeah, no, I'm looking forward to this today. This will be
looks
a good
like
call.
we got the dress menu today, or menu, the dress memo today.
The appropriate attire.
Yes.
The only thing I didn't do is I didn't button that top button up there, so I look like I'm anyway. And there we go.
Gosh.
So
yeah. So what are we going to do today?
We today are going to, so this keys off of some conversations that we've had with clients and a conversation that came out of our mastermind. So leaders, listeners to this they're all about real stuff, but this is like fresh in the context. It's like, we should probably talk about this. We're going to talk about strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about strategy. You know, when we talk, and we're going to kind of take it apart with our definition of leadership, but we Blaine and I talk a lot about mindset and solo business and imagination and all of those pieces, the pieces of the iceberg that live under the water. But today we're going to talk about strategy.
That's something that's above the waterline that
ideally
is causing people to align as they move towards that destination, whatever that destination might be.
Oh yeah. It is either in plain view or it is not. We're going to talk about that. So I'm looking forward to that. And then we'll poke a couple of these folks with a stick and go, remember that conversation we had? Go listen to this Power of You.
Look at this one. So
pay attention.
Ready, aim, miss.
Yeah. What?
But I thought we were all set up.
Exactly. I thought you said we were bear hunting. No.
Yeah. Another way of saying ready, aim, miss is ready, fire, aim.
Yes.
That kind of comes into play too.
It does.
This question about strategy. I mean, I've been fascinated by strategy. When I was doing work with Nokia back in the day, when I started with it back in the mid '90s.
Yeah.
They had Michael Hammer come over from Harvard, and they had developed a strategic initiative. And it was kind of like, okay, now this was what, 30 years ago. I'm going, I've heard a strategic initiative. What are you talking about specifically?
Right.
And so we got into some fascinating conversations about the use of strategy and what they were intending for it to produce.
Oh yeah.
And it was keyed to what at that time was their vision, which I've talked about this before. Their vision statement was Vision 2000.
Yes.
Just an abstraction. And people would continuously go, what does that mean? And the strategic initiative was designed in part to answer that question. What does this mean? So that's what wear going to be looking at here. And they were quite successful with it, by the way. Beginning early to mid 90s, about 94 on, they became the largest purveyor of telecommunication equipment, including handsets, in the world. Yeah. And they started out as a ne'er-do-well. I think they were about a fourth or fifth tier player, when I got into the game with them.
Right.
So
right.
Let's take a look at this. Big mistakes. We always start with these.
Oh, I know. It's funny. It's just kind of thinking about these. With the first one, right? Leaders rally the team around vision, but never define how work actually gets prioritized across functions. Which is that. This was one of the roots to why we should probably talk about strategy. Which is one of the things that. Yeah, and I think that leaders get lost in that I've got a vision and I've got a core value and we're good to go and and then the meeting is okay. Go.
And if you have a siloed organization, hey, I got the message. We're going to go out and you've got all of these silos moving in different directions. This is when you're looking at prioritizing across functions. There has to be a strategic initiative, a strategic imperative that points to that outcome.
Yeah.
Now, this may seem commonsensical. You would be absolutely, maybe not, but you'd be absolutely amazed at how infrequently that strategic piece gets put into place in a way that people can work with it.
Right. Yeah. Yes. We see that over and over and over and
Over and over.
and over. It's like, help me understand.
So this is where we're going. It's kind of, you got the leader out there pointing, that's where we're heading. And that doesn't get translated out of the boardroom meeting, out of the executive team meeting, out of the leadership team meeting, into a clear way to make choices.
Yes.
It's not about, are we going in that direction? You've already said, yeah, we are. We already bought into that. But now how do we make choices? Actions are predicated on choices that are made. Choices are a function of the decisions that people hold about what's important.
Well said. Yeah. And then I love these all hooked together. Leaders push for execution. What happens at the end of the meeting is, I've seen this time and time and time again inside of a meeting, and there's deadlines, and then there's milestones, and then there's paths where everybody's going, and then they let everybody go figure it out for themselves. We're going to go self-interpret direction. And to your point, I love you touched on the fact of around silos. It's hard for companies not to have silos. That's a constant. Maybe that's the next power of you. As we're thinking about that, maybe silos. But as that happens, then you start self-interpreting direction, and then it creates that 3% drift, 5% drift on direction, and pretty soon they're lost in it's Gilligan's Island.
Good, I like that.
Yeah, just don't know why that crossed my mind. Just sit right back in here at jail. That could be the theme song for that project that everybody agreed to for execution.
The minnow sank.
The minnow sank, exactly. And you're going to decide whether you're Gilligan, Marianne. Anyway, for you young people, that was a TV show back in the.
That was a interesting and playful and kind of fun show. Anyway, we digress here.
We digress. We'll go on.
The net of these four mistakes is that there's an assumption that's been in place, that is made by the leaders in the organization, and it's organized around what they observe. People nodded. They even heard people say, "Hey, this is a good idea." They assume that there is alignment, and alignment here has to do with prioritization. Appropriate prioritization of choices. And it's you align around decision making. That's why in Nokia we had this thing that they called the strategic initiative. Initiative set things in motion. And so there's strategy is a pathway, it's a road to the promised land, but there has to be some initiating in that way, which informs the decisions that are made, which then develops choices out of that. I mean, there's a cascade that actually begins to occur.
Right.
And if you assume alignment up on the front end without vetting it, without doing the necessary work to be sure that it is in place,
you gotcha. And I love that, because people hey, I was in the room. I saw Fred shake his head. Therefore, that meant he had it.
And they go round and around.
Nope, Fred didn't have it. Did not have it.
And then you look up one day and you've got these symptomatic things that are occurring in the organization. And these are, again, we, in the interest of time and just illustration, we only limit these things to four. There's more than four mistakes. There's simply and definitely more than four symptoms that you'll appear when strategy isn't working well for you.
Yeah.
And one of them is, we'll just start with number one here, and these are not in any particular order. We're working hard, but we're moving the same. I'll try this again. We are working hard, but not moving the same priorities forward. And the same priorities. This is that question of alignment.
Yeah.
Does marketing have a prioritizing way of understanding what sales is doing, which is understanding what production is doing? These are priorities. And are they marching in some sort of rhythm towards that objective?
Yeah.
Or are we just working hard?
Yeah, I love that. And then number two, why do I keep getting pulled into decisions that should already be clear? Which, by the way, this is a double-edged sword symptom. You're getting pulled because you didn't make it clear and they're not clear.
Yep.
You assumed clarity. Because you're saying, yeah, I'm assuming, because remember Fred, right? Fred shook his head. And I keep getting pulled in to make decisions because first of all, it's comfortable to have me in the room. Like last week, we talked about being the hero, right?
Yeah.
So it's comfortable to have me in the room.
If I'm not in the room, where do I belong? Yeah, well.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And this thing about clarity too. I mean, in our mastermind this month, we are spending an entire month focused on clarity as a leadership imperative. How do you actually communicate clearly? And it's not in the words that you're using.
Right.
So clarity isn't to be assumed to exist, and it's not assumed to be easy to produce, which is why we're spending a full month on it in this mastermind program. The leaders that are working in this mastermind program are very intent on exhibiting the kind of behaviors that will begin to address these symptoms.
Yeah.
Which moves us into number 3 here. Yeah, why does every team's different version of what winning looks like not align? That's because they've got different understandings of the strategic initiative. They think it only applies to them. Yeah, they've got these. Yeah, I'm in marketing. What are you talking to me about production for?
Yeah, the silo one. Look at my SEO results.
Exactly.
Huh.
Yeah, we're hitting our KPIs. I mean, I don't know what your problem is.
Exactly. I always have this picture of Charlie Sheen walking down the aisle going, winning. So
I forgot about that episode. Yes.
Winning. Then laugh. Why do we keep redoing work that should have been done right the first time? Which hooks all into this. It goes back to, why am I here for decisions? Why do we have challenges with winning? There's different versions of winning, and why do I have to now go back and do it again? Which, by the way, doing it again doesn't cost twice as much.
No.
Statistically speaking, it's 5 to 10 times as much from a cost perspective. So why do I have to keep going back and redoing it? And that's has to do with this whole concept we're going to be talking about today, strategy.
Okay. So I love this quote from Churchill. However beautiful the strategy, you should occasionally look at the results that are being produced.
That's right.
This looked great on paper.
I know.
Boy, we did our work, the executive team. We did our work in just kind of hammering this thing out.
Yeah.
What's actually happening out there?
Yeah. That always reminds me of that. Yeah. The person who looks at the souffle and says, sure worked. Did you follow the recipe? So, yeah. What are we doing? But yeah, I do like this quote, right? But occasionally you'll want to look at the results.
Yep. Because they will give you a pretty good sense of what's happening.
Just a little bit. Yeah. Just a skosh.
So all of this is in service or is impacted by, not necessarily in service of, but impacted by the way we lead. And Dolan and I have got a very specific definition of leadership here. And it has nothing to do with command and control.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with directives in the way that word is often understood. Leadership is the activity of influencing. Yeah, this is state of being. This is a state of being conversation. Yeah, I am a conversation. I want to get a little abstract here. I am a conversation. Yeah, when I move through the organization, there is a story made up about what's important.
There you
This
go.
is the influencing dynamic. People have scripted ways of interacting with me, with each other. Influencing is about recognizing, number one, what that script is. Number two, modifying it in a way that subjectively you're beginning to create movement that is in alignment with what you want to have. That's what influence actually is about. Okay, it's not about shouting from the rooftops. I mean, you can certainly have that be part of it, but we're really looking here from a subjective perspective, energetically. You cause movement when you step in the room before you've ever opened your mouth.
Yep.
And then you're doing that because you ideally want to co-create. Ownership is going to transfer. You got this great idea. You want to transfer it to them so that they own it. This is where the whole idea of emotional engagement comes into play. Yeah. Do they care about it? Or, and care shows up in commitment. The lack of care shows up in compliance.
That's important.
Yeah, that's huge. So influencing
Really?
in order to co-create. So there's an invitational process that goes into play here. Coordinated movement. Go.
Yeah, and coordinated movement. That's not because you co-created now coordinated movement. That's that opportunity where you now get to work together on what moving forward looks like. So how do we coordinate this? What steps do we take? And then, and what do we do? And if that's a component of co-creating, and then of course, pursuit of the worthy ideal. We're going to talk about pursuit in a little more detail today, but yeah. And with worthy ideal, I want to lean in on worthy ideal. When we talked earlier about we've got a vision and we've got core values, and we may have a worthy ideal. Worthy ideal is not 10% reduction in cost. Worthy ideal is not 10% increase in profit. Worthy ideal is not 20 more pallets moved from A to B during the day. The worthy ideal is still got to buy a forklift. Worthy ideal is that thing that matters, and it matters to the organization, to that direction, but it matters even more importantly to the individual. And where the ideal is completely unique, it's that inspiration. And you can't tell someone what their worthy ideal is.
And that is the piece that you want to create alignment around. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, you got a 100-person organization. When you start parsing this thing down, you're going to have probably close to 100 different answers to what matters about that vision. What matters to me about that vision? And then you'll kind of scale it up a little bit, and you got a team of 10. What matters to the team about that vision?
Right.
The question, and this is what strategy provides now, is a way to prioritize and organize those different meanings so that there is alignment, so that they are actually going, oh, I get it. And that creates a sense of interdependence in the organization, where if you're not producing, if you're not bringing to the table what you can bring to the table because it matters, I'm going to be compromised. My ability to achieve what matters to us, to me, is not going to be as robust as it could be.
Yeah.
That's what this is all about.
Very, very important. That's where silos dissolve.
Yep.
Silos, separatism dissolves. And the reason why, this is the first time we've had this slide.
Yeah, I like this slide.
But the reason why this matters, and that's why I said definition one more time with feeling.
Feeling.
It reminds me in the studio on the 10th take when I was singing some lyrics, the engineer came on and went, okay, you know the notes, put some feeling in it. So as you think about this flywheel, we talk about influencing, we talk about others, we talk about co-creating, talk about coordinated movement and pursuit. In the center of that lives for the sake of what? That's the center of your universe, is for the sake of the what. Without that, you have no grounding. There is no gravity.
Yep.
When you think about that from an orbit's perspective. But it is the pursuit. It is that strategy which comes out of co-creating coordinated movement and pursuit. The pursuit is the strategy component. All of those pieces, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, must exist. If they don't exist, then you can't get to the for the sake of what. It literally is impossible. You can try, but you can't get there.
Can't get there. Yeah.
Yeah. So
the way that you can begin to think about this, typically the framing of, and they'll be pretty general about this, but the typical generalized framing that leaders will work with is vision drives execution. If we can get people to just buy into the vision, execution will just be a natural consequence of that.
yeah.
And that does not hold water, quite frankly. It's that, yeah,
No.
that frame's just kind of full of holes. And
Yeah.
you keep trying to refill it and it just keeps leaking out. The reality is strategy, your strategy, the way, the strategic initiative, the initiative to cause movement, to move, that's what aligns execution. It doesn't create execution, it aligns execution. And that's a big distinction to make. Most people are pretty good at executing on things in organizations. We're pretty schooled in how do we get goals. That's why we've got our Trello boards and we've got our KPIs. We got all that stuff. We know how to do the do. What we're not particularly adept at is aligning the do's.
Yes.
And that's what strategy makes possible.
Yeah.
Vision sets direction, strategy defines the trade-offs. And this is where, when you think about prioritization, okay, if we do this and they do that, now we're at cross agendas. One of us has to do something a little different here. So what's the trade-off? So how do we begin to determine that? And, beautifully, what happens here is it begins to your point just a minute ago, starts to break down silos. Okay,
right.
We wanted to do it this way because it made sense from a marketing perspective. We did it this way because it made sense from an operational perspective. But it's going to take us in a divergent direction. So marketing, why don't you let go of that timeline right now while we get this set up over here? So you begin to adjust priorities.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the dynamic that comes into play here. For the sake of what creates meaning, and meaning is what we use to cause motion. Kind of this is important. Strategy creates focus. Kind of goes back up to that first bullet point.
Yeah. Yeah, love that. When we talk about for the sake of what, one of the words we could have inserted in there, just as you were saying, that was common meaning, right?
Mm-hmm.
Critically important. We've talked about common meaning before. And without a strategy, teams optimize locally and not collectively. We talked about that a little bit from a siloed perspective, because what happens then is two things on the team side is the team then begins to do, they interpret what's the right thing to do based on the team that I lead with the capabilities that I have. So they optimize based on what I have. So there's a director of finance, a director of marketing, a director of operations, a director of technology, and they each have. And so they optimize based on what they have. So what they optimize locally rather than optimizing across the body, which is where the silos tend to fall down, tend to break apart. Then it becomes a cohesive view. And that's the benefit of that strategy, that strategic imperative, that initiative that we're moving towards, and that clarity that happens there. You begin to have them ask, what happens if I'm in operations, what do I need to do to serve technology in their pursuit? Not what do I want? How do I serve?
Yep.
How do I connect to that?
Yeah, which leads literally into that next piece. It's not, the strategy is a living thing. It's not a static document. Ideally, when you've crafted it, you've got a strategic initiative, a strategic intent, strategic direction that's lined out here that connects to that vision. Now it basically, well, not basically, now what you have is a framework for decision making.
Yeah.
Because you're going to be faced with all kinds of choices. We could choose that. We could choose that. We could choose this. We could choose. The decision informs the path that the choices now live on. And that's what you're doing with this, is making clear what choices are appropriate to be engaging with. And
Yeah.
if the priorities aren't clear across the teams, you don't have strategy. What you've got most likely is we intended for this to happen, but you look at the results and it's kind of like we missed the mark. How in the hell did we miss the mark? We were,
We
yeah, everybody said they were in.
we
When,
int- I intended to succeed.
yep. And it was a legitimate intent. I was Scout's honor. I did a pinky promise.
Yeah, yeah. I was sitting next to the Fred when he nodded his head. We intended. Oh yeah, love that. Love that reframe. And in your mindset, we may trade off on these, but
Yep.
first the mindset is, and this is leaders think about how you think, right? Mindset is there's a bunch that goes into mindset, right? There's habits, there's paradigms, there's all. But let's start with the first one. If everything is important, I haven't made strategic choices.
Yep.
I haven't clearly articulated or decided what are my priorities. If everything is equally important, then everything is equally strategic. And that can't happen.
That can't happen. Yeah. Yeah. Another way to think about that is if everything's important, nothing's important.
Right. Perfectly said.
You just dilute it. It's kind of like, well, okay. Which, yeah, teams interpret operational direction differently if things aren't clear.
Yeah.
Yeah. We didn't define strategy clearly enough. And as a consequence, we've got operational direction. Again, we kind of get this divergent, siloed organizing principle. And that's one of the telltales that your strategy isn't clearly defined and adopted.
Oh boy. Yes.
That adoption piece is important.
A committed decision.
Mhm.
Yeah. That adoption. And then if I'm the escalation point, the strategy isn't operational, which there again, if we think of you as the escalation point sitting in the middle of all of that, there's an orbit that goes around you. Is your team empowered? Does your team trust you? Are you communicating with your team to allow for innovation? Because they're not going to do it the way you do it. They're going to do it their way. And have you built in that system of accountability so that there's an agreement with each other on how they move forward? So if you're the escalation point, you haven't operationalized that strategy.
Yep. They keep looking to you for the answer.
You haven't empowered them. They're waiting.
Yep. Yeah. And that notion of the escalation point. Let's just escalate this. We'll escalate this.
Yeah.
And you're the catcher.
Oh, yeah. I was thinking, not to digress, but I will. But it was funny. I was thinking about that, Blaine, on many large multi-$100 million implementations. I remember being in meetings where somebody said, okay, we need Bob here to make the decision. Well,
Yep.
Where's Bob? Well, he's on vacation. When's Bob coming back? Next week, which ends up like with what? Maybe, I don't know. So, but it is that it does. Do you literally grind everything to the wall? If you are the escalation point or someone else is, you're not operational.
Right. So net of this is clarity is your responsibility. It's your role to be driving clarity by asking questions. Now, obviously, you're going to make a declaration. Here's our strategic initiative. What does it mean? So that question comes in. How do you see this being operationalized in your area? Not now. What do you assume is going to happen without vetting it? So that's a vetting piece that is really crucial to have in place here.
Yeah, that's so important.
And the reliance on vision is I mean, you're going to do that. I mean, a good vision is inspirational. A good vision will get people's attention.
Yes.
But you want to have some container that allows for the activity to be targeted. And that's what strategy does. Another way of thinking about this phrase, strategy constrains, it's a creative constraint.
Perfect.
It literally, I mean, and we talk about this in the hidden laws programs that we do, the hidden laws of leadership. One of them is the law of creative constraint.
Yep.
You need to have a structure that actually forces people to make decisions and to prioritize appropriately about what are we doing and why are we doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And I'm going to imagine there's probably some leaders as you listen to it, you go, well, wait a minute, you guys talk about empowerment and blah, blah, blah. You're kind of talking about both sides of your face. So strategy constrains. So now you're saying constrain that in that empowered team? Yes.
Yep. Yeah. That's two truths are possible to hold.
That's right. And that's the point.
And
I feel like Walter. And
Yeah.
that's the way it is.
That's the way it is. Thank you, Walter Cronkite. So, how do you behave? This is specifically to the leadership role. Leadership is the activity of influencing.
Yeah.
Establishing a weekly strategic alignment cadence. And I mean, that people will watch you with a pair of binoculars. They say, what's important to him or her? What's important to you?
Mm-hmm.
And they watch your behavior. They watch where you're, what's on your calendar. How distracted are you or how focused are you? Top two priorities get reviewed across all functions so that people aren't making assumptions about what's the priority. I mean, I was facilitating an offsite with a group of senior executives at a pharmaceutical group in Japan. And we got to this conversation around near-term and long-term priorities. Long-term, in this case, had to do about 18 months out.
Yeah.
And 5 people on the team, 5 executives and from the different functions. And instead of 2 priorities, we were looking at, okay, what are the top 3 priorities that this organization is actually focused on right now? 15 of them is what they came up with, because I had them do this individually. Write down what you think the top 3 priorities are. Each one of them came up with appropriate priorities for their silo.
Oh,
and then they said, this is what the organization's paying attention to. No, it's not. It's what they're paying attention to. And they got 15 of them. And you talk about, so, I mean, we ended up spending the next day and a half just clarifying what are the 3.
Yeah. That's hard to do. Boy, get down to, that's hard. But it's so much fun when you get them there. Then define and communicate explicit trade-offs. And the tail end of this, the parenthetical statement is, what are we not doing this quarter?
Yep.
And there's always, one of the things I love teaching, talking with executives about is the word, it's a qualified yes. We say yes, but at what trade-off?
Yep.
Because there's people, time, and money. There's do, manage, and lead. What are you trading off? What's trading off in all of this? But define and communicate that. That's if you don't allow that behavior and ask that question, then if we do this, what are we not going to do?
Yep. Which is where that implementing a decision piece comes into play here, because what you're doing is you're looking for ways to link every initiative, every decision to a strategic priority.
Yeah.
If it doesn't link, it doesn't get done. Move it to a parking lot. You can come back to it later. But in this time frame, we aren't paying attention to that. We're not dedicating resources to it. We're not distracting ourselves. Squirrel. Nope. Don't even feed that puppy.
Yeah, exactly. And as part of that, was you're going through that, right? Through these behaviors. So behavior number 4, require each leader to translate strategy into team level execution plans, not just an interpretation. And there's a very different, interpretations are bounded by words like I think, I suspect, I feel, I guess, I assume. There's subjective. Yeah. They told me. There's subjective things that go out in front of that. So require each team to translate strategy into team level execution plans. An execution plan may change, but it's explicit. And that gives you an integrative view. That's a good word, integrative. Integrative view, right? We talk about silos and taking silos down. At the team level, here's the execution plan. This is how it integrates with the plan, the strategy in general, and how we cross. What it means for all of us to pull in the same direction. If you've done that well, you're actually able to audit, which is perfect, right?
Yeah. You can say, okay, where did we hit? Where did we miss? Yeah. And that if you've got clear strategy that has been translated into high-level execution plans, that's granularity. And granularity brings it with it accountability, not blame, but accountability. Yeah. So this is where you begin to tweak and fine tune stuff in service of that worthy ideal.
Yeah. Very, very, very true. It all connects back to the definition of leadership, all the way back to those 5 moving parts.
There.
Yeah. So why does this matter? So there's a lot of this, when Blaine and I talk about leadership, we do this every week for the Power of You, we talk about this, why this matters. So what do you get if you do this? What happens? And what improves is probably a good another talk. Why does this matter? Well, decision speed increases. And just stop there. Decision speed increases, which means you can course correct. You can decide to do one of the 3 most, any strategy, there's only 3 components of a decision. Do more or less, do more, do less, do none. There's no other decision to make. You could, from a decision, one of the things that matters is decision speeds increase. And you now can do that with clarity because you don't need constant validation.
And I mean, the intangible, which is not to be overlooked because it is intangible, is that trust builds. This is the foundational piece that gets built when you've got effective strategy in place that people are actually behaving in concert with. I mentioned interdependence a little bit ago. I begin to trust that you are going to deliver in a way that is appropriate to where we say we're going to go, and I'm not being sandbagged, and I'm not being blindsided. Yeah, those sorts of things come in, and make no mistake, when you start doing big things in an organization that requires a focused strategy, it is a political game at one point in time, and in so many ways, because people politics is the aggregation of power, the aggregation and wielding the use of power.
Right.
And most leaders, in particularly mid-sized to larger organizations, power is important.
Right.
Budgeting, head count, all of that stuff comes into play here. So trust is really crucial here because we begin to look at trade-offs again.
Yes. Yeah. So good. So good. You break trust, you got other problems. Execution becomes predictable. One of my favorite things at the very end of this is not personality driven. And when I was putting this together, I was thinking of, and I'll give this guy a shameless plug, Rick Moore. And he's an amazing, amazing guy. But one of my favorite things when I led technology stuff long time ago, pre-white hair, was if it was really hard, I sent Rick in. He was it was personality, rather than focusing on the fact that execution, creating predictability and execution and a team that could sustain that. I had my personality. I could grab him out of the air and go, Rick, take the hill. Yep. And I knew that he would go in there and kill anything that moved. So, and then call me and say who was supposed to die. So,
another metaphor.
Probably not an appropriate metaphor, but there you go. But as a leader, one of the things that you're looking for, and we talk about this, which is ease and elegance, which is to minimize unintended consequences.
Yep.
And you do that, right?
Yeah, and that translates into actually, continual, predictable, and appropriate growth.
Yep.
Alignments in place, and it replaces effort as the driver of the process.
Yeah.
And if you're relying on efforts, you're going to be actually creating burnout. And burnout is one of the kryptonite components of growth, or to growth. I mean, you're gonna quash growth if you've got burnout.
Quickly.
Yeah. So with a highly effective strategic initiative in place that people understand, they bought into, they actually are executing against it, you're not worried about motivation at this point in time. You go back literally to, what's the implication of that worthy ideal? Well, now it's inspiring. Inspiration comes from the inside out. It
Well
needs
said.
a way to execute. That's what the strategy provides, is a way to execute.
Yeah.
And it becomes, basically a strategic clarity system that, and a system. So it's something that's, you can replicate it. It's kind of like, that's how this works.
Yeah.
Okay, we do this enough time, people begin to understand the dynamic. And every time you make something new appear, people, okay, we got the drill. We know how this works.
Yep. We know the strategy will be different, but we know the system.
We know the system.
Yep. Which is creates that. And then the big win. Vision without strategy creates misaligned motion. I'll say that one more time. Vision without strategy creates misaligned motion. That was the problem we discussed with this individual.
Yeah.
Vision, core values, no strategy. My team is sitting around twiddling thumbs. Misaligned motion or no motion. Strategy creates aligned direction, that aligned motion. It is your job as a leader. Your number one, you cause motion.
Yep.
That is
And
what you do.
And you don't have them running all over the place, because you have strategy actually creates constraints that allows for targeted action.
Yeah.
Teams don't fail because they don't care. I literally have never met anybody in an organization in the 40 plus years that I've worked as a consultant in organizations and led my own organizations. I've never met anybody that doesn't care at some level. They wouldn't
Right.
show up if they didn't care.
Right.
They fail because they don't have aligned constraints. They don't have a way of targeting their activities. They don't have a way of executing in a way that's meaningful.
Right.
And it's that lack of meaning that begins to take the wind out of the sails.
Yeah. Love that.
It's not the execution that breaks the effort. It breaks clarity. Yeah, that's what we're looking at here. Execution doesn't break at effort. It breaks because clarity isn't present.
Yeah, trying harder doesn't help.
No. Yeah, let's push. Yeah, we'll keep pushing that rock up the hill.
I know. Yeah. Maybe if my team worked 12 hours a day. No.
Yep.
No.
Yeah, which is a good point, because working harder is not a strategy.
No.
Working harder is not a strategy.
Oh, goodness gracious. No.
So,
all right, where do we know? Let's reflect. So here's these are questions. Exactly. Get in the lotus position. Do it right in the middle of your office floor. Don't do this. But anyway, where are you allowing multiple interpretations of strategy to exist right now? These are questions to ask yourself. And by the way, ask these questions of yourself when you are setting strategy.
yes.
Before you walk in. Where am I? What interpretations are there? Where am I allowing different interpretations? What is the risk? What's the hole where I'm going to allow those interpretations of strategy to exist? Work through that question. Next question.
And then, where am I saying yes that contradicts the stated priorities?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, this is, if strategy is literally about effective priority setting.
Yes.
And in most organizations that Dolan and I have worked with, there's automatic yes machines running around.
Yeah.
Yep. What are you specifically? What are you still saying yes to that contradicts your stated priorities?
Yeah.
And
you create a whole bucket full of yeah buts.
Yep.
And then where are you the bottleneck? We talked about this a little bit, so I'll go quick on it. Where are you the bottleneck? Because the strategy isn't clear enough to operate without you.
And right at the end here, what would you need to stop doing this quarter in order to make your strategy real and realizable?
Right. And key words in that sentence. Stop doing.
Yep.
It is not what do you need to do. It is what do you need to stop doing this quarter.
Say no.
Yeah. Definitely.
So here's a summary slide.
Yeah. That's pretty.
Yeah, I like this slide. This really captures it pretty well. So take a screenshot of this.
Yeah.
Take a screenshot here, because if you've got vision only without an effective strategy, what you've got is inspiration without direction. People wake up in the morning and they're going, ooh, I can't wait for this to happen.
Right.
They're clear about where we're going. They're clear about why it matters, but the strategy doesn't provide a framework. It doesn't provide a framework because the strategy is absent. Unclear priorities, misaligned teams, rework and waste, decisions drag, inconsistent outcomes. You've got motivated teams, but you've got misaligned execution. You got lots of activity with minimal impact.
Yep.
And on the flip side, you got to have both. We remember the flywheel. Think of the flywheel, the 5-part flywheel. If you want a copy of that slide, just ping us and we'll mail you the slide. We'll talk about how to get all this stuff too. But clear priorities, align your teams, efficient execution. These are the juxtaposition of the left column. Yep. Faster decisions rather than decision drag. Boy, decision drag is deadly. And that's honestly, it's funny, Blaine, I was thinking about that. Look, when I created this image, that is where I see most projects die, is in decision drag. Because then then you end up with paralysis. That's a whole nother power of view right there. Paralysis. And then consistent outcomes. So that's what you're really looking for. Are the projects or strategies going to go the way you thought they were going to go? No. Well, if you ever have one that does, let me know, because I've always looked for one. Yeah, I'm looking for a unicorn.
Yeah, exactly. But you end in a place because you've created that system. And Blaine, you said this, when you have that system and that the team knows this is what we do. The strategy is going to adjust, but the system is going to remain consistent.
So this is kind of the summary of what we've been talking about for the last 45 minutes.
There you go.
And you can find out more about this. We're just going to kind of throw this one up here. We have created a community that we invite you to participate in. All of these powers of use programs are archived in this community, the Soul of Business Experience. You can go directly to this URL, scan this QR code, and I'll just bring this up full screen.
Yeah, bring it up full.
Yeah, bring it up full. Now, the Power of You program is embedded in that. The Power of You is $297 if you wanted to have just access to that on its own. In this community, this is part of the community resources. We've also got a toolkit in there. We've got access to a whole masterclass series. We've got articles. We've got surveys. We've got just a bunch of stuff. And we're curating on an ongoing daily basis, literally, articles, insights that Doland and I actually are coming across that I think, or that we think would be useful for you to have access to. Yeah. So go ahead and check this out. You can actually go to this QR code and check the site out. Free of purchase at this point. But if you want to actually buy into and get access to the resources in the community, there'll be a little place there where you can click and say, hey, sign me up. But you can also just kind of land on there and see the public resources that we are curating there. This is a very specific community that is designed for leaders intent on enhancing not only their leadership effectiveness, but also the impact that they're having.
That's well said.
So take some time and take a look. It's a Fino obligation. It's a Fino invitation. Feel invited, not obligated. Fino invitation. Okay.
You're invited and obligated by
You're
God.
Invited and obligated by God.
That's right. Who said this was a democracy? Just
exactly.
Okay. Well, there you go. Strategy.
Strategy.
We got it. We covered it.
We do these every week on Thursdays. We've got about almost 60 of them in the queue right now. So there's a pretty good library. And part of the intent on doing these is to make these sorts of things available, not only to you as the listener and the consumer of this, but it's available to download. And you can take it to your teams. And there's usually about 45 minutes. Sit down at a team meeting, play one of these videos and say, hey, what do we think about this? Yeah, we've got stuff on decision making. We've got stuff, I mean, anything and everything about leadership is contained in these Power of You programs. So take advantage of it. Yeah, I mean, between Dolan and myself, we've got almost 90 plus years of work in the trenches, leading organizations, working with organizations, building teams, building organizations.
Realize that's almost
running into walls.
Man. Yeah. All right.
Folks, thank you very much for listening today. We'll see you next week for another Soul of Business.
There you go. See you.
Take care. Thank you for listening.
Bye, everybody.